Good day. My name is Brian Smith, and I'm going for my master's in mobile gaming design at Full Sail University. I'm working on my capstone project called World War I Flying Circus. And I'm going to take you through some performance examinations that I've been doing with the game. So in Unity, which is the IDE, or the Integrated Development Environment that I'm working in, something called a profiler. And you're able to set this up while running not only in the Unity editor, which isn't all that exciting because it's kind of a fake environment, as it were. But I've got profiles here that I've recorded on my iPhone. It's a Pro 11 and an antique Android. It's a Galaxy S5, which is should be in a museum. So what can be seen in this profile, this is I've got a performance setting in the game where you can set it to say, I want to do 30 frames per second, or I want to do 15 frames per second. And so this is set for the 15 frames per second. And this is what you want to see with the profiler, this wait for target FPS. So the game is actually, my player loop is only taking just a little bit of time. So I've got, let's say, fairly efficient code from a CPU point of view. GPU is able to handle the frame refresh. And so basically the game sits around and twiddles its thumbs for this waiting for the target FPS to arrive. So it's probably just about 3 milliseconds, 30 milliseconds of waiting, and just 3 milliseconds of active processing with the CPU. So really efficient on the iPhone, very powerful. This is giving the frames per second at 15, which gives you more time in terms of milliseconds, up to 66 and 2/3 milliseconds. And you can see there, I'm just even waiting, that same chunk of time, or an increased chunk of time, waiting for the next frame to actually then generate, where the objects are in relationship to each other, and then go to the GPU to have it render all the different objects in sequence. So really good message there. This is the good. And then, of course, there's the bad and the ugly. So this is the antique Android. And if I take a look at this, from what I've been able to understand, this graphics wait for present on graphics thread, since that is really long, this is that giving it as much time as possible. It is basically GPU bound. And so the CPU is indeed just taking, a handful of milliseconds over here for the calculations per frame, but it's the GPU that is bound. And I run this on the Galaxy Tab A that we have, and then also too in my wife's Samsung Galaxy S7, which is a little bit more modern, but still not a very good GPU in America and in China. And it exhibits the same kind of performance where it is GPU bound. So it tells me that my coding from a CPU point of view, the things that I can control, I'm doing a fine job with. Of course, there's always places I can optimize, but I think I'm a fairly efficient programmer just from a mechanical point of view. But the GPU, which is, it's kind of, right now for me, GPUs are kind of that magic fairy pixel dust that makes things fly. And so I don't really fully understand exactly what I can do to really dramatically change things. I have played with a number of different settings let me just get this pulled out here a little bit, if this is going to let me get this pulled out. A number of different settings in the inspector. Example, like with the Zeppelin, it had it so that it was receiving shadows and casting shadows, and that the materials down here were having highlights and reflections. These things I don't need for this game, so I turned off all those things for all the different objects that that's an effect for. Didn't see any performance differences with that. I played with the size of the textures. So basically my project here, I'm getting more and more animations from Armin, which is exciting. The size of the textures. Here, for example, this is the ground plane, which is a very large file. It's 14 megabytes, but I played it with the textures. For this one, it's 2048 for the max size, so it gets crunched down to the 2048, compressed to that, because I don't need it any higher resolution than what you're really kind of seeing here. And then some of the other things, just even smaller resolutions in terms of the max size. So did that to help the GPU along. Nothing again dramatically changed. And also too other smaller things. For example, there's a for the ground plane, since it's not changing, there's something here called the static processing. So it's because the object is not moving, you can just have it rendered one time, and then it can be cached, batched, or cached for the GPU. But again, no dramatic changes. In fact, I even went as far as turned off like the ground plane object, and then reran the performance analysis and all that, and other different objects, just to even turn them off if they weren't necessary for the game. And there's nothing really that helped me on these the different galaxies and some of my antique phones. So good news is, from a iPhone point of view, the performance is no issue. From some of the Android things, I've seen something that's wrong, and so the next step is a little bit more investigation. Is this good or bad or ugly? Um, is it is this out of the norm? And so for that, Professor Penny, if you have any advice, if you could point me to certain places or people to kind of help me understand a little bit more about the performance issues that I'm seeing. I think I've got a good handle on it. And two, my game is not something that you have to have 60 or 100 frames per second. So it really is something I need to be mindful of course, but it's probably in the end not a deal breaker. But yeah, if you have any thoughts or ideas, let me know. The other thing I still do want to do is just kind of create a really almost like an empty game, 3D game with a couple of simple objects thrown around, and just to kind of see um, if it is indeed for these antique devices, if it's just they'll never keep up in terms of the frames per second with the GPU just because their GPUs are so old. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, again, let me know if you have any additional thoughts about what I can do with this. So with that, I'm going to stop my share. So thank you much.